start the recording now. Thank you very much indeed, Jane and Anne, and handing over to you for shifting strengths for the success in the second half of life.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's as if you were in Sue Blair's session yesterday, she said that part of this was for her as she was trying to figure the things out. And Anne and I feel the same about our session today. We've read this book and we saw type connections for ourselves and thought, hey, let's explore this during the British conference to see what other people see about what we saw as a useful framework for moving into actually what I've called the third half of life for quite some time because we're living so much longer. But just a couple of thoughts. If you did happen to pick up and read this book before the session, if you could use the hand raising function, just so Anne and I know that what we've got in the room. Our handout has many quotes from the book to give you some ideas of what it's about for the breakout rooms. So know that that's available and we can drop it to you again. But you know, what I think back to my very first type conference in Boston, and Sharon Lavoie on this session was in the same room with Otto Krager back in 1998 at the Great Boston Type Party. And Otto was about the age that I am now, and he was doing the spirituality symposium. And he talked about how aging is a process of relinquishment and diminishment. If you can hear Otto saying that, if you knew that great contributor to the type community. And at the time, I thought that was pretty negative, being much younger than I am now. And as I've moved into this third half of life, it really rings true. You're relinquishing some of the things in positive and in tougher ways, and there is a diminishment of what you can do, and yet there's a new richness, which is what I think this book really, really pulls out. So what we're doing today is looking at how our personality type can help or hinder the main frame of this book, which is shifting from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence. We were wondering, do some types, and we'll define all this in a minute. We were wondering if some types struggle more than others with this very wise transition. And does the framing of the strengths of this third half of life speak more to some types or others? And Anne and I thought that maybe type differences would be most helpful if we used our decision-making functions. So extroverted or introverted feeling, extroverted or introverted thinking are the breakout rooms we'll be doing this in, just to see if there's any patterns to everything. And this quote popped up, and I think it was in the book even. What's a normal goal to a young person becomes a neurotic hindrance in old age. And that's really part of what the author of From Strength to Strength is saying. You know, we've got these things we do as young people that just don't make sense when we're older. And if you're still, you know, trying to stay a fit person, that's the obvious side, but it applies to what we're doing in our careers and home life. And Anne, I'm going to let you take over and give us some framework for this.
All righty. I'm going to. So what was interesting about this book, and I think it's such good news, really, once you get over the bad news. The idea that fluid intelligence is something that we have when we're younger, generally speaking, the ability to reason and think flexibly and solve novel problems. And we use this type of intelligence in our 20s and our 30s. And as you start to get past that, then you're starting to have less of this and becoming more an individual who uses crystallized intelligence, which is to take stock of the knowledge you already have and put it together in unique ways, perhaps creativity with the known. And so when you're young, you have these raw smarts, but when you are older, you have this wisdom, and you can't really have it concurrently. You move from one style to another, and that's the main topic, or the main distinction that's made in this From Strength to Strength book that we were chewing on for this session.
And Einstein, we thought, it's one of the examples that Arthur Brooks uses in the book, but Anne and I, since we saw Einstein's actual handwriting last time we were in Oxford together, which is what's on the slide, we thought we'd use him as our example and how he moved. And, the beginning of the book talks about people who successfully and happily make the shift, and then talks about those who don't, who are just discouraged. And if you look at Einstein's life, you can see the green zone, the yellow zone, and red isn't necessarily bad. It's just the crystallized intelligence, but you can see that he was done with all his major personal discoveries by the age of 36, is when he completed the general theory of relativity, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize at age 43. Then you start seeing the shift as he starts collaborating on the Bose-Einstein effect with Niels Bohr, who is only 42, so a little bit younger, still maybe more in the fluid intelligence stage, whatever. But that piece of moving to where, hey, let's work together, let's share our knowledge, let's see which each of us can draw on from our stocks of knowledge. And that was the start of quantum mechanics. And he did continue to work on that, theory of everything, as you might call it. But you see in his later life, he moved on to the teaching, to the passing on of what he knew, working at Princeton in the Institute of Advanced Study. But then it's also really interesting what an activist he became in that second or third half of life. He fought against McCarthyism in the United States with all the trials and labeling people as communists. He fought against the H-bomb and looking at the downside of what his theory of relativity had unleashed. And he was also a proponent of civil rights in some very, very significant ways. So you can see that he went from these world-changing discoveries to this idea of passing on what he'd learned, to synthesizing, to going to much more of this wisdom side of things rather than the discovery side of things.
Yeah, and so in this slide here, there's a term that's used in the book of striver. So people who like to accomplish and strive and accomplish and all of that. And then there's a point at which you've worked so hard to do this, you're a striver, and then you get into your early 50s and that's not the deal anymore. And so what we have here is, this is also from Oxford, right? That we took this picture as well.
Right,
people
all the landmarks on one building of all the scientific discoveries.
All the scientific discoveries, and yet, there's a point at which you've done this part of your life, and you're still a striver. So what do you do with that energy? And are you going to fight it, or are you going to make the change over into the new style of leveraging your cognition?
Yeah, it's the deal and it's not fun. Sorry. But he goes on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, your options are, are you going to deny the facts and rage against the decline? The interesting start of this book, and it's a great read, is this author is on the airplane and he is overhearing a conversation about a guy who's talking about how his life is washed up. He's not significant and all of this, and he's kind of leaning into this. And then when the flight is over and the guy gets up, he realizes this is an extremely famous scientist, and this guy is complaining about how he's irrelevant. And so this is a guy that was obviously fighting that transition. You can also shrug and give into it and be like, well, that's it. These are my limitations. This is how it goes. Or you learn that what got you there has to be in some way transitioned over to some new sets of strengths and skills. So it's true for everybody that they're going to get to this point, that they're going to go from fluid to crystallized, but how you leverage that moving forward was the key in this book.
And I put this background in because, is it a sunset or a sunrise? What's going on here? Are things over, or are you coming into a new day? And how you frame this makes a difference in how you view even a picture like this.
Mm-hmm.
So What pursuits use crystallized intelligence? First off, I put up there's so many people in the type community that are still contributing or contributed literally up to their last moments. I've got Otto Krager and Gordon Lawrence, Otto trained more people in type than anybody else. As far as the certification program, Gordon laid down the foundation of the activities that we used and was influential in education, and Sally Campbell and Ann Sullivan in the UK have continued to make contributions. And what we see, and they can is using that crystallized intelligence. It's used for teaching, for synthesizing everything you've learned and making connections regarding what you learned, discovered, created, and making it more powerful. I talk about the dichotomy of creativity with the known and creativity with the new. There's less of brilliant new and more of brilliant ways to use the known. And often I'm thinking on, I've got these ideas, how do I get them across? Or how can I make sure others can use them? And Ann and I've talked a lot about how can I do it fast so I have more time with my grandkids? When I look, and Ann and I were thinking, we've sort of naturally done this I don't know that I've created anything new or done any new research in several years, but that drive to synthesize, to make it more useful. Ann and I's last project, if you were at BAPT in 2018, and we took everyone's phones away in our first communications about bandwidth. We turned that into a book for educators, hoping to pass it on. And we're just thrilled that the publisher's taken over making an online interactive course with it, and that we didn't have to do the work. We don't care. We just want to see it used. And it's this shift in things that seems to have come around rather naturally. And part of it's energy. Even though we're both still able to do so much, I can go back and think in terms of milestones. Like 10 years ago, I thought nothing of teaching a 4-day workshop, and at the hotel room on, after the trainings each day, I'd go back and work on chapters in a book. And I don't do that anymore. I have to conserve my energy, not just physical, but like the brain, to have the energy to be present the next day. So there is this shift. Yes, there we all are at an in-person conference, Anne. Thank you. And Sarah and Angela.
Yes,
But
haven't changed a bit.
No, not at all. Go ahead, Anne. You want to explain what we're going to do in this first breakout room?
Yeah. So this first breakout room, we're going to be thinking of a significant move or thing that you accomplished in that sort of fluid intelligence age of 20 to 40. And what would it feel like if you had to do that now? What strengths would you use when you were to do this now, and what strengths did you use back then, and how are those strengths working for you today? Do you use them a lot? How do you use them? So just kind of thinking about yourself in this model of crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. So that's our first discussion.
And it could be, I think even of working with the Cub Scouts or Girl Guides or something, and how my approach to it would be different now, not necessarily work.
Yeah. So
you'll be able to,
so
you'll be able to choose your breakout rooms based on your decision-making function.
Can everyone see that? Has everyone got an option there to go into a breakout room?
Are you going to go into our room, or
I'm not?
Okay. Yep. All right.
I don't see a breakout room.
No, nor do I.
Click on the.
I don't see any either.
Click on the button. I don't see ENFP on there.
Yeah, at the bottom there's breakout rooms. You click on that and then it gives you the options.
Oh. No.
I'm trying to launch them. Are they not happening?
We can see them, but I can't see my type up there.
I went into it once. Put it up again. I went into it once and now I've lost it. It's have breakout rooms at the bottom, but now it's gone. I thought I might be alone in my group as well. So.
Right, and we don't have the secondary function listed under the the decision making. So like the FI only has
so it's-
ISFP and INFP, but
Yeah.
not ENFP.
Right.
Oh, so it's all TJs, isn't it? So it's not just the ETJs, it's the
Okay.
ITJs too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Sorry, I've
Okay.
just had to. Is that clear now? People able to get into them?
Yeah, I've lost the option to go into the breakout room at the bottom of my screen.
Sue, I'm moving
Okay.
you.
Okay. Feel free. Hooray. Thanks, Jane.
Okay, I just.
Where should
Okay.
I go? I'm an ENTP.
Yeah, me too.
Should be a TI room in there.
I just sent them all.
Let me.
They should all be gone.
TI is ISTP and INTP.
Yeah.
Okay, fab. Thank you.
Okay.
So that worked. Everybody's got
Okay.
something.
Is Teresa? Shall I put you in a group? Oh, she's gone. Okay. Don't
And
know
everyone
what
has
happened there. Apologies. Let me.
No worries.
Stop it.
Welcome back, everyone.
So let's start with putting in chat. Did any themes with your stories come up in your groups? The groups varied in size. I hope you could have used more time other than maybe Sue and Graham might have had enough time for the two of them. But were there any themes or interesting ideas with what we've talked about with fluid and crystallized intelligence so far? Or if you want to, if it's easier to raise your hand too and share anything that should be shared that way.
Yeah, maybe have them raise their hand so we can
Needing more
probe
energy.
for further information as needed.
Oh dear. Sorry.
Well, Anne, you
Sorry
just
about that.
shared one as an ENFP, realizing that you don't have to do boutique everything, that some things you can use and have more
Resistance
energy for something
strategies.
else.
Yeah, just that realization that boutique does not have to be a piece of my identity at every moment, because that takes a lot of fluid intelligence, frankly, to be boutique all the time. You know, heavy NE.
Nothing's wasted. Use what we've learned from Tim. That's such an important thought. You know, we've got all this knowledge and wisdom. What do we do? More time in our inferior function after the age of 40, and Jung would celebrate that. Reinventing yourself, learning from the mistakes of the past. Ah, yes. In my younger years, I spent time writing workshops and holding on to that information. Now I freely give it away. Just that wanting what you've learned to continue. To please, somebody else use this. Don't let it die off and not be used by anyone else. Does that ring true, Sharon?
Yes.
Yeah. Getting to a point of knowing it's not necessary to do everything. A mindset of self-care. Yeah. Like a teenager, but with money and wisdom. I love it. So, channeling energy and not wasting it. You know, and this is, you know, Anne and I, being the women of a certain age, you might say, we're having retirement conversations just left and right. And we thought about this with people we coach, with relatives, with friends, and who's making the transition easily, whatever their decisions are, and who's really really struggling with this whole shift. And so that, you know, that was our curiosity about the type connections. John Axon said, I don't think we really discussed that actual question, which is just fine. Insights will pop, I'm sure, as we go into this next part. So the book is also clear on what can get in the way of letting go, I think is a better term than giving up, of what made us, whatever we've done to get where we are, and moving on to a new way of thinking about ourselves. And, you know, the quote on here, in 6 months, I went from who's who to who's he, is part of what some struggle with. And Brooks talks about the strivers having a really hard time. That's the nameless bureaucrat, a statue in Reykjavik, if you haven't seen it before. But he talks about the strivers are those that define their self-worth in terms of their job titles or professional positions, or who quantify their own success in terms of money, power, or prestige. Those who fail to see clearly or are uncomfortable with what comes after your last professional successes. Those who have a retirement plan that's just doing more of what they're already doing, which works well in some fields. He points out professors go a longer time because, of course, that uses the new form of intelligence, and historians take the longest time to actually reach discoveries because of how much they have to learn. And then, do you dream about being remembered for your professional successes? And he points out that I think we have these quotes in the handouts. You know, there are only a few Einsteins and J.S. Bachs and others in the world, and we may not be remembered, but we may have an impact on people. Just like Sue Blair just found out she had an impact on how Shirley could handle her own child. So we just, you know, take a look at the strivers have a hard time repositioning on these questions, and that gets in the way of it. And you want to cover the second block?
Yes, I'm trying to get rid of all the cascade. Okay, here we go. So another thing along with being a striver is a definition of satisfaction. So society will say satisfaction equals continually getting what you want, and success equals continually having more than others, and failure is having less. So we have a cultural thing that contributes to this. And dissatisfaction is a malady that makes us chase our worldly rewards to get even greater heights, get desperate to achieve enough to be satisfied. We find that instead we actually end up going backwards because we're falling off this thing called the hedonic treadmill. So this idea that you got to just keep going, and at some point that just doesn't work. And we have to redefine what it means to be satisfied in order to harvest this. So this is you, Jane, over here in Iceland. So yeah, so satisfaction, what you have divided by what you want is the deal. So
sorry, I didn't know I was muted. Yeah, it was interesting. It was my second eldest nephew's 25th anniversary this year, and he said his friends kept saying, "How do you stay together?" And he said, "Well, you just do," which is not true of all the relationships. I understand that, but the point was, you know, if you keep reminding yourself that this is a good relationship, and what you're getting out of it, that you're satisfied with what you have, it's just a whole bit of a different equation as far as being satisfied with what you have. I mean, is this bad weather or is it intriguing weather? I don't know that you can walk on water if it's a sunny day in Iceland, so it was a good day. So, you know, he brings up that the secret to my decline, and this is the author, actually enjoying it, is to be more conscious of the roots linking me to others, is the other big theme in the book, that wisdom is only beneficial or satisfying is if you can pass it on. My connections to others makes my jump to the second curve all the more natural and normal. Indeed, the crystallized intelligence curve is predicated on interconnectedness. And Anne and I think back to the other readings we'd done on how our brains are wired to be social, you know, that we couldn't survive you know, we talked about this yesterday in the first keynote. You know, we would have gotten eaten by saber-toothed tigers if we hadn't banded together. And so this whole idea of, you know, thinking about this second half is passing on what I know to others, whether it's a child, a grandchild, those in our professional circle, so that the mistakes we've made and learned from, they don't have to necessarily make or can make in different ways, is key to making the shift. Anne, what else did you want to add to this?
Well, I was going to add too, it's really like passing the baton. If you're going to pass the baton, you have to have somebody you can pass it to. And those that interconnectedness or the relationships and things that you've built become very critical in this whole successful phase. Without it, you're just blowing in the wind. So the interconnectedness piece is very important. And so in this transition, there's also an emphasis on making sure that you are nurturing your relationships so that in fact you can have the satisfaction of handing something off to somebody who actually is going to take it, appreciate it, and advance it potentially.
I'm just checking that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, John Haxon pointed out that there's just a direct, the striver and capitalism, and definitely that's there. I had a wreck that made me wake up from being a horrible treadmill. Yeah, I think some people make this transition just because of a life event that makes them question everything, and others just slam into this, wow, I'm not being able to do things as well as I could with a horror, and so what we, Anne and I are really hoping to tap the wisdom of the group, and these are the questions we've got. So as you go back into the same breakouts, we're going to ask you to appoint a spokesperson so that we can hear from each of the 4 groups. Does your personality type, or how does it help or hinder shifting away from what got you to where you are, that fluid intelligence, to the crystallized intelligence? Are there parts of this, we've just given you a glimpse of the framework, but are there parts that resonate or don't resonate? As in, you got to where you are in one way and now you're moving to this fluid or crystallized intelligence. And what makes your group unique in moving to crystallized intelligence?
And we picked this because it going into this new phase is at the end of the day a decision. So we picked the decision modes to see if we could mine for interesting and unique perspectives on it. So that's why you're in these groups.
And Sharon suggested we share this slide with the breakout room, Sarah. So I'll figure out how to do that. Or if you want to take a screenshot of it just to make sure you've got it. And we'll open the same breakout rooms. And
how long for, Jane?
We can do 10 minutes again, and we'll have 10 minutes to debrief. So that should do it.
Okay.
Venue in Paris we were talking about.
I missed that, Jane. What did I do?
You helped us get to and from that spontaneous venue in Paris when the organizers reserved the conference room for the second day. Yeah.
Follow me, everyone. Yeah, funny.
Can I just start this session by saying I ended up in the wrong group because I couldn't see ENFP on any of the lists. And it sort of led us to perhaps wonder whether we should be divided by our perceiving functions rather than our
decision
making functions. Because
and we could have gone.
We felt it was much more relevant. So I felt comfortable with my group.
Yeah, I think that's from there.
We went back and forth, and one of our motivations was just knowing the makeup of this group, maybe having a little bit more equal size breakout rooms. It was a good part of it, but also you are making decisions, and so we thought it would be interesting. But we'll take insights any way you give them to us.
Yeah.
So maybe we could ask extroverted thinking to go first on anything that you came up with in your groups.
Okay, so I was actually secretly hoping you wouldn't choose us first, because I'd work out what someone else would say and kind of work with that. But Graham and I had a really lovely chat. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and we sort of thought that extroverted thinking, because I'm ESTJ and Graham's INTJ, so we had a dominant function and auxiliary function, so that was a little bit different. But going from our earlier years to our more sort of mature years, we both have transitioned from using extroverted thinking in a sort of more corporate business orientation to softening and using it in a very different context. So for myself, we went into sort of parenting and not-for-profits, and for Graham it sort of went into the faith ministry. So we were still actually trying to sort of communicate outwards with clarity and all of those things that extroverted thinking is known for, and sort of searching for an outlet. That you've got that lovely quote here at the bottom, which is you know, without it, my wisdom has no outlet, you know, without that crystallized intelligence. So I think it's been sort of good to change that that context. What else did we say, Graham?
Well, we were pondering on the fact that the creativity, the fluid thinking says that you're actually generating new stuff. The crystallized thinking is actually working into the data bank and digging in and saying, now, how does that apply? That, you know, that experience is what you get just after you need it. When you've had it, you've had a lot of, you know, when you've had a lot of experiences and you've been on the cabbage stump several times, you recognize the journey. So that you know, you don't perhaps make the same mistakes that you would have otherwise.
And I think it's that the gift of that stored wisdom is really huge. Not just, I mean, I was thinking it might just be an ESTJ thing, because, you know, it's introverted sensing, we kind of store a lot of stuff. But I think that stored wisdom is just stored in different places with different types. But, you know, no matter what type you are, you still can access it and have the pleasure of it, to say, yeah, I have got this now, and I can put it out there into the world. And it, you know, I am, you know, I'm not declining. I'm actually more useful than I was.
So we're
Well,
going to
when you talk about that stored information, I'm thinking about from the perspective of like an NE. It's not the stored information, but the more and more patterns that are coming together that are creating that wisdom. Because I still, my stored wisdom is.
Yeah, and certainly I think so. It's more about making perhaps more informed intuitive leaps with you know, because dominant, introverted, intuitive. That's what happens. That I'm basing it on, you know, rather than you will be digging into a whole load of you know, you got a whole database. The filing cabinet's full of stuff you can pull out. Mine would be more making the leaps, I think.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I'm going to move on to introverted feeling, simply because I'm looking at the clock.
Okay.
So
I've got it succinctly put together. So our earlier years were defined by the search for the perfect theory and unmet expectations, trying to fix people. Our later years are realizing the limitations of the theory and the fact that our dream for others is not necessarily their dream for themselves. So our goal now is to help people get unstuck. Does that define it, everybody? Okay.
And does that fit with, is that how you're thinking you're unique on this journey? Is just that, I mean, it sounds like a very feeling journey, so I'm fine with it. I'm just wondering if that's okay.
And has it affected the kind of work or the amount of work that you're willing to take on? Have you used your FI as a sorter for where you actually are going to put your energy versus before?
Exactly. And we all talked about the amount of energy we put out in the earlier times, and now it feels like being more at peace and realizing the limitations and of both things, that we can't fix people and we have to figure out a way to help them get unstuck. And that, as I said, every theory has its limitations, and being at peace with that.
How about introverted thinking?
Great. Hi. So we just had a lot of fun as introverted thinkers. First of all, we sort of unpicked the question and disagreed with it. Then we failed to appoint a spokesperson. And then we decided that, in fact, maybe the introverted thinking was less important than the intuitive function. And then we also decided that we didn't recognize the striver motivation, that was a bit kind of simplistic. And so it was really interesting. So it's a difficult group to summarize. We had a lot of fun, a lot of intellectual fun, but I'm not sure we really totally did the task. and we actually had different perspectives on how useful the introverted thinking was. So one of the group felt strongly that, in fact, the extroverted intuitive function was the best thing about, you know, the most useful thing. One of the group found that introverted thinking kind of combined with that conceptualizing was useful, and divided the phase of coming up to retirement and going through retirement into reimagining, rejuvenating, recreating, and refining. So that yeah.
I was going to ask you, is there anything in the TI that would have created any resistance or any sort of predictable resistance for your group from making that transition? Do you think?
I mean, as the oldest in the group, the sort of moving into old age, and actually because of my introverted thinking, I can still read and study and use my brain, and being able to be active and do all the physical things that I can do now and have done, losing that will be less of a threat. I mean, losing my mind would be much more of a threat than losing my physical ability.
Okay.
You know, and I think, you know, it is meaningful that the book came out of a corporate sense of all the strivers who've made, you know, that their position and power has been who they are. And so there is a transition when we're talking about people who've, you know, built their careers in different ways. But but he takes a spiritual bent in a very open, not a defined Christian way in the second half, looking at this. That's an interesting part of it. Let's hear from our last group, introverted and no,
Effie,
thank you.
Well, we also did a lot of time, had spent a lot of time talking all around things, and didn't really have a spokesman decided until things were just getting cut off. So the last kicking around was my name, but we didn't really define it. Interestingly enough, we ended up spending a lot of our time talking about definitions, you know, the fluid intelligence and the crystallized intelligence. What did that make us think? How did that make us feel? And one of the things that was talked about is that, you know, with the fluid intelligence, you're constantly growing, you're adapting, you know, it's constantly moving, it's a moving target. But then as you get older, we can look at the crystallization as either like a calcification, where it hardens, it takes shape, it gets hard, and it's like almost like being stuck in our ways. Or we can look at it as things are becoming crystal clear, that we have a better, we don't have to strive as hard to learn, because we have our past experiences and wisdom that has given us crystal clarity in how what we know. And so we don't have to spend as much energy in that fluid area, and we can learn and adapt more quickly. And then we also spent quite a bit of time talking about energy, you know, that when we were younger, we juggled so many different things. We were such multitaskers. And now, as we're in a different phase of life, we're realizing that we can't do it all, and having to prioritize personal care more, and understanding that it takes more time to take care of our physical, emotional, spiritual needs, putting more energy into that than ignoring those things and just being caught on the treadmill.
You know, I wondered if you'd bring up the personal needs part of the ESFJ equation, and I'm glad to hear that you did.
You know, and as I listened to all this, I hope this is just a start of a conversation on what helps us transition to a fulfilling, you know, not looking at it as just a decline and diminishment, but someone asked for a definition, and you know, he does talk about wisdom, you know, moving from smarts to wisdom, and how do we relax into the wisdom that we have and think about how we can use it, and enjoy that piece of where we've been and where we still want to go. So we'll stay on for a couple more minutes for questions. I just know that we are at the end of our time, and we so appreciate all your participation in this conversation where we would just picked your brains. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Anne, very much indeed.
very much.
I'll stop the recording now, but if people are, as Jane and Anne have very generously said, they're happy to stay on for a few more minutes if anyone else has got questions, but I'll stop the recording now. Thank you.